Blood tests are not enough to answer all the questions you have about your health symptoms. In fact, many of my friends, like Paul Saladino, published a video about his blood test. And we've run functional medicine labs on him before. We've run it on so many other people in the health space. And we always find things deeper than what blood tests really show. So I'm going to talk with you about the things that blood tests won't find. I love blood testing. I've run blood tests on people thousands of times, and we find thyroid issues, autoimmune issues by looking at thyroid antibodies. We found massive amounts of anemia. Certain nutrient deficiencies can be adequately tested and fixed via blood testing. We can look into specific cardiovascular markers. We measure D-dimer. We've seen a lot of long COVID, and we measure the coagulability. We do a coagulability panel to measure the health and the viscosity of the blood, and we see the numbers improve when we do things like natural herbal blood thinners and enzymes. So blood is great. Your conventional blood test is pretty terrible. In fact, most clients have to seek someone out like me, a functional medicine provider that's going to help run above the standard of care blood test. And you may find that you're begging your doctor to run thyroid antibodies and they won't do it. But if you can get advanced blood work, yes, it can help. But it's still not going to find these things. Number one, parasites. Now, some would argue you can look at eosinophils and maybe some other digestive health markers that will suggest that you have infections, but it's not perfect. And I've seen many cases where red blood cell, white blood cell, eosinophils, neutrophils, all are fine, but there are still intestinal parasites. So the blood for looking at infections is not a perfect science. In the stool, though, we can find all sorts of different parasites, worms. Number two, and then number three tied directly into this, because a lot of your brain chemistry is involved with your gut. What I'm saying is, if you have parasites, if you have dysbiosis, a lot of times your neurotransmitters are going to be affected. So all three of these things interplay with each other. I've seen 3,000 cases around the globe, and many of those cases, there's a mental health component to that. There's an anxiety issue, a depression problem. And when we look at the gut and when we look at the urine, so stool and urine, we can identify infections here, we can identify dysbiosis, either through the urine and through the stool. And when we find these different issues, this could be anything from strep, this could be staph, this could be Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, Citrobacter, Morganella. There are dozens and dozens of species of pathogenic bacteria that can trigger various autoimmune diseases. So in the case of Klebsiella, it's known in the literature to be a potential trigger for Hashimoto's, which is autoimmune thyroid. Now, back to the whole blood thing. Okay, sure. You can get thyroid antibodies run if you beg your doctor, or maybe you have an endocrinologist that's a little more advanced. They'll run thyroid antibodies. But they're not going to show you the dysbiosis that actually caused the thyroid issue in the first place. So when they put you on thyroid medication, you're still not getting to the root of the root, which could potentially be this dysbiosis. Now, the neurotransmitter piece, when I'm talking about that, we're looking at dopamine, we're looking at serotonin, and these are specifically related to motivation, drive, energy, getting things done, irritability, worry, anxiety, insomnia, OCD. If you have any of those symptoms, it could be related to these brain chemicals, which we measure in the urine. I'm not aware of any blood test that's going to do that. Number four, fungal and yeast problems. This is amazing. Here's the deal. On stool testing, it's very rare. I've run thousands of stool tests. It's very rare to find a fungal or a yeast problem there unless it's really bad. The cool thing is, though, when you have a yeast or a fungal infection or a mold colonization where you've been exposed to mold and you're growing it, when you have that happening internally, there are byproducts from that. Imagine measuring your car for emissions testing. There are byproducts from that combustion of gasoline, your spark, etc. Same thing with the body. When you have a fungal or a yeast problem, the metabolism of those infections spits off these organic acids we can measure in the urine. So this is an incredible tool that could be literally life-changing, life-saving. We've seen massive amounts of this happening in children. I'll pop up a test result on screen here. You could see a young child that had massive yeast and fungal issues from living in a moldy home while the mother was pregnant, as well as being born into a moldy home. Number five, overall what we're talking about is digestive health, yeast, fungal, bacterial issues, parasites. Digestive health as a whole is so much better identified with stool and urine. But specifically, we can look at what's called elastase. Now, elastase is a marker on the stool that looks at your pancreatic enzyme function. We can also measure what's called steatocrit. Steatocrit is a fecal fat marker, so we can have an indication of how well you are digesting your fats or how bad your fat digestion is based on a stool panel. Also, we can measure what's called anti-gliadin IgA. So we'll just put AG for short here. So anti-gliadin antibodies. This tells us whether or not you have a reaction to gluten. It's very controversial, but for testing for Crohn's via blood, it's very challenging and most doctors don't do it. They often refer to a biopsy and you got to have a lot of tissue damage. We can find gluten sensitivity far before it turns into something more severe by using the antibody test in the stool. Also, one of my favorite markers, and even conventional gastro is going to tell you that this is legit. Calprotectin is a marker for gut inflammation, and this is widely accepted in conventional gastroenterology. This is an incredible thing we can find on the stool. We can find massive amounts of inflammation in the stool test before it turns into Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, celiac, or other irritable bowel diseases. And if you just go to the GI doc, you get diagnosed with IBS based on symptoms alone, or maybe they do a barium swallow on you and say you have IBS. That's what happened to me over a decade ago. That doesn't help you figure out these other things. I had parasites, I had H. pylori, and I only was able to find that because I went above and beyond the standard of care and got the functional medicine labs that gave me the data so then I can find all of my issues, and you can't fix what you can't find. So my whole philosophy, test, don't guess with your health. Get these functional labs, go beyond blood work to really transform your health. If you need help, evanbrand.com has all the info. Look forward to talking with you soon.